Excellent, excellent. That's the first hurdle passed over. Well, as Nick said, I'm the chairman of the G QRP club. I've been a member of the QRP club for, I was shocked to find out, 37 years when I checked it. I was actually a member of the club before I was licensed, and it was thanks to good old George Dobbs and company for getting me going and giving me the encouragement to get my license in the first place. So when 2-3 years ago, when I volunteered to help out and they asked me to be chairman, I was extremely honoured to take that up. So I don't know what I did to deserve it, but anyway, here I am. I always introduce myself as an amateur in that I'm not a professional electronics engineer or anything like that, completely self-taught. Those that know me, my career was in the civil service and the dreaded health and safety police, but now I'm a part-time university lecturer, and all that is well behind me. So one good thing to come out of austerity was I got early retirement, so that was good. So others may know me from the RSGB work that I did. Well, I've been working for the RSGB for a long time as a volunteer. I did a spell on the board as and ended up there as chairman for a while as well, which was very interesting. And here we are now as with the QRP club. And we've already met one member tonight who was one of our distance learning students. So that's one other thing that I do when I'm not doing all the other stuff. So what are we talking about tonight? I thought I'd put a sort of menu together with some of the sort of frequently asked questions that people say about QRP. I'm not going to read through those because we'll go through them slide by slide and I'll talk you through them. But you'll see at the very bottom, there's an opportunity for questions at the end, and I'll be very happy to take questions. And I believe somebody's going to collate them if you put them in by text as we're going along, and we'll be able to answer them hopefully at the end. And I've flashed that sort of book cover up there because it really is QRP basics. It's one of those topics that the more you think you know, the more you find out you don't know. So there's lots more to find out and always new things to discover. And the other thing, I don't know if my pointer works, that if you can see that little blue square in the middle of the picture, that's the transmitter known as the Oner. And it was known as that because it was 1 inch square. So it covers one band on a PCB 1 inch by 1 inch, and it produces about 3 watts output. And in the next edition of the club magazine, there's a rehashed version of that circuit that's now the 2.5er, because it's on a 2.5 inch square printed circuit board. But more of that later. So start at the beginning. It's always a good place to start. What is QRP? And it's obviously got its origins in the Q code when the old CW operators used to send QRP ? It was a request to reduce your power. And over the years, as transmitter power went up, some people decided it was a good way to operate was actually to turn your power down and see what you could achieve. So QRP actually became a way of operating, if you like. It's seen as a good operating practice because, as most people should know, we should use the minimum amount of power we need to make the contact we want to make. And not many people tend to do that. It's the dial's set to 11 from day one, and they leave them there and never realise that they could probably make the same contacts with a lot less power and a lot less electricity being used and a lot less band occupancy. But that's by the by. The definition of QRP, that's something that always generates a fair bit of debate because there have been all sorts of different definitions used over the years. And the internationally agreed levels now are those that are on the screen. CW and data is 5 watts output, and for SSB and I guess AM, if you're still using AM, 10 watts output for that as well. And there aren't many transceivers on the market that will sort of, that's their maximum. Most, as you probably know, sort of 100 watts is the sort of standard. But most of them can be turned down to those sort of levels if you're so inclined to do so. So it's quite a good way to get going with QRP, is just to wind the power down. And for the sort of extreme QRPers, we've got this QRPP, which is where you've got a transmitter with less than 1 watt output. And I've certainly made contacts with 500 milliwatts, and there's some people who that's their thing. And I have to say, I prefer to have a couple of watts under my belt, but as I say, I have made contacts at those sort of powers. A little bit of product placement went on there. I thought I wanted a picture of a watt meter and didn't realise till I put it up there. It's got Kanga products splashed across the middle, but I'm sure Dennis won't mind having his watt meter on display. So what can be achieved with QRP? Is there any point using low power? Well, yes, there is. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here talking to you. And this graphic is something that I've seen used before. I thought I'd steal it with pride and use it again here. And the premise is that, you know, if you're working somebody with your 400 watts, and I put 400 watts perhaps in inverted commas, and your report is an S9 plus 6 dB. That's the sort of starting point. And I have operated at those sort of levels. I make no sort of secret of that. I've used the QRO when it's been appropriate. But you know, it's pretty standard. You go on, you have your linear turned up, and you get your 5 in plus plus plus. Well, if we take the commonly accepted definition of an S point as being 6 dB, to come down from that S9 plus 6 just to S9, we need to have a quarter of the power. 6 dB reduction brings us down to 100 watts. To go down to S8, we're down to 25 watts, and so on and so forth. And you can see at the very bottom, with the 750 milliwatts, under those same conditions, you'd still be getting a 5 and 5 report, which I'd be quite happy with, quite frankly. So the QRP of 5 and 10 watts really isn't that a massive reduction from the 400 watts. That's a point I tend to gloss over when I'm doing my training for the intermediate or the full license, because you know, people, oh, I'll get upgraded my license, I can use more power. And the reality is you're talking about 1.5, maybe 2 S points at best improvement. So not really the best incentive for progressing up the license ladder. And moving on, you know, what can be achieved with QRP? And this is one of the things we hear a hell of a lot. Is life too short for QRP? Well, no, it isn't, is the short answer. And despite many people thinking that you know, the cartoon is the way of the world with QRP, you know, it's fine for working across town, but it's no good for DX. Well, I've got some sort of results just to play back to you and show you that really is a fallacy. My own experience, people say, well, how far can you get with low power? And so, well, I've worked in New Zealand, and that was with an FT817. So there was no question of it being more than QRP, and it was just a wire dipole. I'd been working a string of Germans with DL call signs, and this guy came back, and I thought, oh, here we go again, another DL. And he went, no, ZL. And I had the QSL card direct a couple of weeks later to prove that it wasn't my imagination. It was a good contact, and thoroughly enjoyed that experience. I've also worked the States, Australia, India, all with QRP, and in some cases SSP. It's amazing what things you can work when the conditions are right. I thought I'd mention the RSGB Home QSO party as a bit of a topical thing, which the second round of that is still ongoing. And there's different categories in this QSO party. It's not a contest, but people do get competitive about these things. And the first round finished, I'll check my notes here, there were 526 people took part in the party. And the G QRP club came 44th in that, which, considering there was a heck of a lot of people running 400 watts and that, I thought was a pretty good showing. I was then shocked to find out, proud and shocked, I guess, to find that 3 of the top 10 stations internationally were QRP stations. So when people say, oh, there's no point operating QRP, and you know, you've got to have that high power, clearly not. The guy who came, I think it was 3rd overall, is a QRP club member and proud to work low power. I can only believe he's got a very good location and a good antenna system. but we'll not dwell on that. And the current thing, just to prove that wasn't a fluke, the second round is in its second or third week now, and the QRP club is 44th out of 280. So again, QRP holding its own, and I have to say my location is pretty rubbish, but other people seem to be doing very well. Anyway, that's one example of what you can do with QRP. The next one is a bit of a historical one. I don't know how many people knew George Burt, GM30XX, who's sadly no longer with us. But he was one of the first people I came across when I got licensed, and I wanted to know at that time how he'd managed to work over 100 countries with QRP with a wire antenna. And his advice was, get the longest bit of wire you can, put it as high as you can, and feed it in the middle, and you'll not go far wrong. And he was pretty much right. He worked, before he passed away, over 300 countries, all with homemade radios, all with 1 watt or less power. So it may have been a lifetime's sort of work to get to that level. And some people do that in a weekend, I guess, if they're in the right place at the right time. But George proved that with a bit of perseverance and some good operating skills, you can achieve a heck of a lot. And on the screen there is the circuit of his famous OXO transmitter, which I think there's thousands of those been made. We certainly use them as intermediate projects. We hand out a little printed circuit board and people make a CW transmitter, and it's a great circuit. It's been around for some time and it still works. So I commend that to the audience. Bringing things bang up to date, this is Carl, and I'm very grateful for Carl in allowing me to share a picture of his shack and a magnificent collection of Morse keys he's got there on the shelf. And Carl was the winner of the club trophy last year. It's the Chelmsley Trophy, and it's for the best log of the whole year. So basically you keep a record of everything you've worked through the year, submitted at the end of the year, and the one that's deemed to be the best wins the trophy. And there's a sort of summary there of what Carl managed to do last year. Over 1,400 QSOs, nearly 120 with two-way QRP. He worked 71 countries, and all mostly with 4 watts and a G5RV antenna, which, as far as I'm concerned, is pretty good going at a time when the propagation is said to be non-existent, you know. But Carl's plugging away through the year and did some great work. He also won the trophy in 2018 and again back in 1999. So he's clearly got the knack in terms of getting the QSOs in the log. But yeah, good guys, Carl. I think he's an ex-military signaller, so that may give him a bit of an advantage. Why do we do QRP? That's a very good question. It's like, why do we do amateur radio? Because we enjoy it, isn't it? Not for any other reason, I don't think. But there's a few things there on the slide, and the picture, which one of I spotted in the audience, Colin provided me with this picture. Thank you, Colin, for sharing that. I think it's the Hereford Radio Club out on a VHF contest. But this illustrates how the portability of QRP, if you get your radio, some batteries and your antennas, toddle off up a hill somewhere, you can get great results. And the people who take part in summits on the air have illustrated this, that they always get excellent results. And I know from personal experience, again, operating up in the Lake District in Scotland, from the Isle of Man, from high ground, you don't need a lot of power to get some great results. And things like the FT817 really opened up that portability sort of game with the internal batteries and everything. The more recent rigs like the mountain toppers and that, you stick them in your back pocket, never mean a rucksack. It's amazing what you can pack into a small box. Cost, that's the next thing. A lot of people are put off by modern radios being, you know, a price of a small car in some cases. Whereas a QRP rig can be put together for a fairly low budget, and things I'll come on to later, but certainly tens of pounds is enough to get you on the air with a QRP rig. Clearly, if you're running less power, there's less RF whizzing around. So in theory, there's a lower EMC risk. You're not going to blot out your neighbour's DAB or digital television if you're only running a few watts. Although the only time I've ever had a breakthrough problem was here with QRP and a VHS video that decided it liked to suck it in. So it doesn't always work, but there's definitely a lower risk with less RF, and QRP is a good reason for doing that. And probably the biggest reason for going QRP is the challenge. There was a very nice article about 2 years ago, I think it was now, where Roger, it was a great DXer, just got bored with shooting fish in a barrel with the linear and decided he was going to turn the wick down and started to work everything with QRP. And I don't think he told anybody he was doing that until after he'd done it for a while, and then reported the results. And everybody was amazed that he was doing almost as well as he'd been doing with his linear and all the rest of it, just with QRP. So my phrase is always that, you know, is life too long for QRO? If you're hell bent on running a high power and working the world in a weekend, fine, but what are you going to do after that? Do it again, I guess. but QRP brings in a bit of a fly fishing analogy. Is one of with a name like Hartley. I'm not J.R. Hartley, but I always think fly fishing takes a bit more skill than using a trawler to catch fish. And you know, why would we go fishing if you can buy fish from the supermarket? Because it's fun, and you know, there's a bit of skill involved. So the challenge of QRP is still out there for sure. Right, so yeah, are there any downsides? You talked about all these good things. Surely there must be downsides. And as the cartoon illustrates, I find sometimes I put my rig down and I can't find it afterwards. It's that small. Certainly the OXOs that George put together, the one air and things like that, it's quite often they get buried under things on the bench. And in fact, there was something in one of the magazines very recently that said, you know, you're a QRPer when your microphone is bigger than your transceiver. And I think that can be very true. There are some frustrations, obviously, with QRP. You're not going to break through pileups if everybody else is running high power. You've got to be patient. And I've sat there for quite a long time waiting for a break, only to find that the station you want to work then says, right, chaps, I'm going QRT, and you've missed it. But, you know, that's again, the fishing analogy, sitting on the riverbank and not catching. Sometimes you have a better day than when you do catch fish, but that can be frustrating. And the jibes, you know, anybody that says they're a QRP operator will get that, oh, life's too short for QRP, what's wrong with you, and all that sort of things. But you know, whenever you're interested in amateur radio, somebody will think that you're mad, whether it's satellites or ARDF or whatever. That we've all got our own interests, and if QRP isn't yours, well, that doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's a different way of working. But if you can put up with that, then it's not a bad world after all. This is a question that, in fact, I was just chatting before the meeting. Do people still build radios? You know, well, yes, they do. You know, lots of people are still building radios. The scene that you see before you is the QRP Club's convention last year. Sadly, we're not going to be able to meet like that this year, but that's what we did last year. I think there was 16 people building a VFO, and the build-a-thon turned into a drift-a-thon afterwards. We had a bit of a leaderboard of who could drift the furthest and who could drift the least. And what the participants didn't know, or they may have guessed after a while, that they all had different mixes of capacitors and inductors, and I knew which were probably going to be the ones, but they didn't. And some of them were actually very good, down to a few hundred hertz of drift in the first 5 minutes. Some of them were much many kilohertz of drift, and that was quite good fun actually, logging that and having the leaderboard running. Some people build from scratch, literally get the bits, you know, design their own, or they get a design from a magazine and they'll build it from scratch. It may not look pretty, but it works. And some people build kits, and I'm going to show you some of the kits that are available to buy shortly. But yeah, the short answer is, in terms of do people still build rigs? Yes, they do. So these are the first set of kits that's still available in the UK. Walford Electronics been going for, I think, as long as I've been in the game. Tim has a constantly changing catalogue of kits. He doesn't run them for very long. He's always refreshing things. And this particular one was one we used for one of our build-a-thons. We built the receiver portion, which is at the front end. This printed circuit board here. That was the 20-meter super het receiver, and we had about 20 people building those for the day. And then some of them took away kits for the transmitter, which is this bit at the back. And when it's finished, it puts out 5 watts of SSB on 20 meters. I think you can get it for other bands as well. And the whole thing came in at about £70 or something like that. So the guy at the other end that you're working, or the young lady at the other end, if they're listening to you, that will sound pretty much like an FT 817 or an 818, 600 quid's worth of black box. But it's cost you about £70, and you can add to it, you can do other things, but in terms of getting on the air, it's a pretty good way of getting started if that's what you want to do. Tim does all sorts of things, from regen receivers up to test equipment and ATUs and all sorts. He's got a website, you can look him up. Next one, Kanga UK. Recently, well, over the last couple of years, they've been moving towards specialising in surface mount construction, and there are 3 examples here on the slide. The top one is an SDR receiver. The middle one is the Sudden direct conversion receiver, which I'm sure if you've been involved in QRP you will have heard about, if not built one yourself. And the one at the front, I think, is an excellent introduction to surface mount construction. It's a little 20-watt dummy load, and you've got resistors, and I think there's a diode and a capacitor in there, so you can actually take a tap off, put it into your oscilloscope or whatever to actually see the waveform that you're looking at. So it's a nice little kit, and you could build it with ordinary soldering iron. You don't need any specialist equipment, and so it's an introduction to surface mount construction. Really good. So that's the direction that Kanga UK are moving in. They've got a 2-tone tester kit. They've got all sorts of other things, and I highly recommend it if you want to have a go at surface mount. Great for a club construction night when you're allowed to have such things. This one's a sort of step up in complexity, but not necessarily in cost. One of the things I did when I was working for the RSGB was to organise the Youngsters on the Air event in the UK, and we needed a project for the kids to build. And Hans Summers volunteered to put something together, and he said he wanted it to be a transceiver, but something a little bit better than a Pixie or something like that. That's very cheap and cheerful. He wanted a usable rig, but I gave him a budget, and this is what he came up with. It's the QCX transceiver, and it's a single band CW 3 watts out, I think, QRP thing. But it's got, as you can see, a digital readout. It's got a Morse decoder built into it. It's got all sorts of test equipment built in. It really is a phenomenal piece of kit. And I actually ran this alongside my Yaesu and switched between the two. And on receive, I couldn't detect any difference in the quality of reception from either of them. The big difference, of course, is the price. Hans has sold nearly 10,000 of these kits now, and they're less than £50 a kit. So again, you can get on there very quickly, very cheaply. Limitation, of course, is CW. If you're not a CW operator, that is a limitation for these. But Hans has just released an update on this kit, which has got more room on the printed circuit board, and I think he's ironed a few wrinkles out. But the fact that he sold, say, 10,000 of version 1 suggests that version 2 should be a very popular kit. And he's also been working on an SSB version of it, but that seems to be proving to be a bit tricky to get ready for market. I think he's got it working, but it's one thing having one working on the bench, but having something that's reproducible by everybody is maybe another step. So we look forward to Hans producing that. He's got lots of other kits, things like the Whisper Beacon. He's got building blocks of amplifiers and various things, low pass filters. So a very comprehensive website, and a thoroughly nice chap as well, this Hans, and a club member. And as I'm representing the QRP club, it would be wrong not to mention the kits that the club produce. And this is the ATU kit that we sell. There's a transmitter, a receiver, and an ATU. All look very similar. They come with this nice black shiny case, and club members can buy those and they build them. And again, lots have been built. You can have a high degree of confidence it's going to work. That ATU will take up to about 10 watts without any problem. I think it's £40 for the kit or thereabouts. It's got a built-in SWR indicator as well. So it doesn't need to cost a lot of money to build these kits. I think that's the message. And the reward from working a station with something you've built yourself is tremendous. I've been doing it for a very long time, and I never lose that thrill of making the first contact with a bit of homebrew gear. So is it all about homebrew? Well, no, it isn't. I've mentioned already the FT817 really sort of broke the mold, I think, in putting a shack in a box that you can carry around with you. It's now the 818, which is the one shown in the on the slide at the top there. I think last time I checked, they were retailing about £600. So again, a step up from the 40, 50, £60 sort of bracket that we're talking about with the kits. But you have got multi-band, multi-mode, built-in batteries, and literally charge it up, plug it in, away you go. The one top right, the G90, is the one that Carl has, the guy who did all the QRP work last year. He uses the G90 mostly for his work. That's a recent entrant into the market from the Chinese manufacturers. Again, I think it's sort of £400 or £500, but it's an SDR-based transceiver. Can go up to 20 watts, so you can allow for coax losses as well as QRP. And works very well. The only negative comment I've heard of that is the buttons are a bit flimsy, but I think I could live with that if it's a good performer. On the bottom row, we've got two of the probably more expensive QRP radios. The one on the right is the KX3, which we used on top of the Isle of Man when we were over there, and I think we worked 20 countries in 20 minutes with it, which was quite some going, just with a wire dipole. And the one on the left is the newcomer, which I don't think anybody's got yet. I think if the virus hadn't intervened, they may have been in the shops by now, but that's the new ICOM IC705. Both that and the KX3 retail at about 1,300 quid. Hence my comment earlier that you could probably buy a second-hand car for the same price, but probably wouldn't look as nice as those. They are nice-looking radios. But again, fantastic performance, SDR receivers, really, really good quality, but it pays your money and takes your choice, as they say. As I mentioned there on the slide, if you want to try QRP, you don't have to go and buy one of these radios. Just turn the power down on the rig that you've got. Most of them will go down to 10 watts. My bigger Yaesu goes down to 5 watts, so it covers the whole gamut. But I know there are some. I think the Kenwoods only go down to 10 watts. But it's certainly a good way of trying what you can do with QRP. This is another one that everybody seems to think it's only about CW, and there's no doubt that you will get farther with CW than you will with SSB most of the time. But there's a lot of people out there operating SSB, and if anybody's not yet spotted it, the 10 watt limit for the SSB QRP level means that every foundation license holder in the UK is actually a QRP operator, assuming they stick to the license conditions, of course. But that really sort of emphasises the fact you see, the M3s, the M7s rattling up the contacts, shows that you can work things with 10 watts. Data, there's quite a lot of data out there, and I've been dabbling with FT8 and FT4 somewhat unsuccessfully, but that's my ham-fisted computer skills rather than anything else, I think. But I was on last week, and the 5 watts of FT whatever was being picked up in the States, when there was really no propagation. It was amazing that the signals were getting as far as they were. And I know Colin would give me a hard time if I didn't mention the fact that, you know, it isn't just HF either. We do VHF QRP, and the PW contest on 2 meters happens every year. Lots of people join in with that. Lots of people have fun, and it's a really friendly day out. A good way to test QRP if you're ever skeptical about what you can do. Oops. Yeah, if you want to test out QRP, probably not this year because it's all home based, but you can still have a go with 10 watts of SSB on 2 meters. See what you can work, and you'll be amazed with what you can do. The radio on the slide there, by the way, that's one designed, modified, if that's the right word, by Pete Giuliano, N6QW. He put that into our club magazine, and he took the old Sudden radio that you saw the SMD version of, turned it into an SSB transceiver, put a DDS in there, and you can see the digital display. Wrote some software to put an S meter on and all the rest of it, and he's got a workable SSB transceiver for not very much output. And I think, yes, it is that version. It's got twin VFOs, you can work split, you can do all sorts with it. So again, you're not limited to a couple of transistors, a crystal, and a CW channel. The QRP has moved on a little bit in the world. Do operating skills help? Well, of course they do. Doesn't matter what sort of radio you're using, it pays to do the right things, and having good listening skills is always a benefit. Listening out for who's calling, listening out to see if there's anybody on the frequency already, listening to see if they're actually wanting to work you. You know, the number of times you hear stations calling CQDX and somebody from around the corner tries to reply to them, that's just bad manners, and you would hope that by listening and operating in the right way, you'll increase your chances of making those contacts. I remember distinctly being in the shack one day, and I was listening to an Australian special event station, and it was working the world, and I was doing something, I can't remember what I was doing, but I was listening to, just interested to see what he was working. And he said, I wonder if there are any QRP stations out there. So I went and picked the microphone up, called him, and we had a 10-minute QSO, and that was with the FT817, 3 watts into a dipole, and nobody was more amazed than I was that the propagation was that great. But it was because I'd been listening and paying attention to what was going on that I was ready to pounce when the time came. Propagation knowledge, that's always useful to have an idea of what's going on. And these days, there's all sorts of aids for this, the Whisper Beacon reporting, PSK reporter, the DX clusters. There's all sorts of things online where you can have a look and see if there's anything happening. And it can be awful frustrating going on a band, calling CQ and getting no answers. But if you check a few of these indicators and see that actually there's nobody working anything, there's not a lot of point wasting your time calling out. So you can use those tools to find out what bands are open, where they're open to, and maybe increase your chances again of getting in amongst the contacts. There are on every band centers of activity for QRP, both for CW and for SSB. So if you hang about around there, you're more likely to hear other QRP stations calling than if you just sort of randomly pick a blank frequency in the middle of the band. And in theory, you should be less likely to get trampled on by higher powered stations because they should steer clear of that, but that doesn't always work, particularly at the weekend if there's a good contest on. Probably the most productive way of making contacts is to tail end. And for those who don't know what that is, that's basically wait until someone's finished a contact. And once they've said 7 threes, call one of them, because they're already on that frequency, they're going to be listening, they may be flattered that you've taken the time to give them a call. And I've certainly made a lot of contacts doing that. And it's a very, very productive way of increasing your QSO tally. Another Marmite topic, contests. Some people love them, some people hate them. We've all got to tolerate them. But they are a very good way of using QRP to see what you can achieve. It's amazing how stations who would normally not answer your call will suddenly answer you if it's going to give them a couple of points in a contest. And I've certainly been on the air with a sort of 5-watt homebrew rig, just not to enter the contest, but just to see who would respond when I give them a call. You give them a serial number and so on. I think in one of them I worked 30 countries in a few hours. It was amazing how suddenly I was audible when perhaps if I'd have been calling CQ under normal circumstances I wouldn't have been. So you can use the contests to check out if your equipment's working, if there's maybe sort of improvements you've made, whether they've been effective or not, and so on. So always good stuff. Are there any awards available? Yeah, and again, this is mentioned before about the challenge. If you don't like competing in contests, you can set yourself challenges and seek out different awards. The picture in the middle there, that's the award that I got. It's 1,000 miles per watt, so you've got to basically divide the distance by your power, and if it comes to more than 1,000, you get the award. And you can see I just scraped in with 1,056 miles, and that was with a homemade thing I built from scratch. So the bidirectional transceiver by Ashar Fahan, which he now sells as a kit. I built one from scratch. It was 3 watts output, and worked the station over in Massachusetts, which was very nice. At the time I worked with him, it was spread out across the bench with all sorts of wires everywhere, like a rat's nest. But it worked, and it's still sitting here in the shack. So a good little radio, that one. So what else can we do? I mentioned before the foundation license holders are by default QRP operators, and I don't know why, but it's not very popular. There is an RSGB Foundation Award that any foundation license holder can go for, and they qualify by just making contacts. You don't need to get QSL cards or anything like that. You just log them on the basis that if you cheat, you're only cheating yourself. But I think you've got to get someone else to sort of sign that they think it's okay. For 40 contacts, you get the bronze award. 70 contacts gives you a silver award, and 100 contacts a gold award. And the only stipulation is you can only work a station once, so you can't get your mate on 4 bands, and you've got to make the contacts across 4 bands. So out of 100 contacts, 25 have to be on each of 4 different bands. So it's a nice little thing to chase that. And I wish more newly licensed people would be encouraged to do that, because I think it would keep them on the air and give them something to aim for and get them some practice. So that's a good thing. The one that most people like to chase is the ARRL's DXCC, where you work 100 countries. And I have to say, if you can work 100 countries with QRP, you're doing pretty well. And I've set myself a challenge to do that within the next solar cycle. So I think I'm at number 4 at the moment. So when propagation improves, hopefully my tally will increase. But that's my challenge to myself this solar cycle. Within the G QRP club, we've got a number of awards. Some of them are based on working countries, a bit like the DXCC. You can also get a certificate for working other QRP club members. Again, the more you work, the more stamps you get on the certificate. And the big one is the QRP Master, which I always forget the exact criteria, but you have to have a number of countries, a number of members, and a number of 2-way QRP contacts. And we've just awarded, or about to award, the latest one, and in 40 years of the club there's only been 150 of these awarded, so you can see it's quite an achievement if you can get to that. But somebody sort of scoffed and said they reckon they could do it in a week or so, but they haven't managed it yet. But again, it's something you can aim for if you want to give yourself a bit of a challenge. I've mentioned the QRP club several times. I haven't said what it is, so I think I probably need to put that right. So there's a few things here that I want to cover. The picture is our brand new QSL card for G5LOW, which is the club's special club call sign. And we've just had these cards printed up. So if you work G5LOW, you'll be able to get a special QSL card, which we've tried to make it so it depicts the flavour of the club. And you see we've got George there, G3RJV, so he's sadly no longer with us, but George put a notice in Shortwave magazine in 1974 to say it had been suggested by a couple of people that the UK ought to have a QRP club, and was anybody interested in joining up in such a thing? And here we are 46 years later, with 4,000 members, most of them in the UK, but a good number overseas. And that number's been pretty static for about a decade or longer now. We've maintained that sort of number of members. The biggest thing that people see as a benefit of membership is Sprat. There's a cover there, and Tex, our editor, is I know listening or looking in. Hope he's not too embarrassed by me sharing that cover. But we're now a full colour magazine since Tex has taken over. He's introduced colour to the magazine. That comes out 4 times a year, and I have to say it's always great to see that when it comes out, and it's always full of good stuff. If you're a member, you've got access to our club sales, so you can get components at very reasonable prices, and some components that are quite hard to source for yourself, where the club provides quite easily, and an excellent mail order service. They also attend rallies here on the QSL card, top corner. That's our sales team of Graham and Pat and a couple of helpers. I think that was at Telford last year, or one of the rallies anyway, and they always do a roaring trade. They also sell books. We've got project books and antenna books, various things like that. The kits that I mentioned, DVDs, and even club coffee mugs as well, which always seem to sell pretty well. I mentioned the fact that they attend conventions and rallies. We hold at least one convention a year, and this year there were going to be 2, one in England and one in Scotland, but sadly neither will take place physically. But we are hoping to do an online convention, and Nick is from Denby Dale is helping us to make that happen. It's very grateful for his input. I mentioned some of the awards already that you can get through the QRP Club. We also have a number of trophies. There's actually, again, one in the QSL card over here. Various trophies that have been going, some of them for as long as the club has been going, but we've got one for the best technical article in Sprat, one for the best antenna article, various ones for different logs. Coming up on the calendar on the 17th of June is World QRP Day. If you didn't know that already existed, but it does. And for the member that sends in the best log of QRP Day, we have a trophy for that, and so that gets awarded each year as well. So there's a whole host of things you can get as a benefit of being a club member. A bit of a warning, commercial thing. It's £6 a year, and the details of how to join are on our website. But and if you get stuck, more than happy to pass on details later on. I think, yes, that's me pretty much done. I included that cartoon. I think that was an absolute cracker there. Of the benefits of having QRP equipment being very portable is that if you ever get shipwrecked on a desert island, then a QRP rig and a battery and a bit of wire, you're on the air calling SOS. So what could be better than that? If you want any more information, the club's website is on the screen there. You can email me if you want further information, but there are books out there, and websites and YouTube channels and a host of stuff. But if you wanted to get a sort of a bit more of what I've said tonight and a bit more detail, I thoroughly recommend the book RSGB sell it, QRP Basics, or the American version, which is called Low Power Communication. Very similar content. It's a bit about operating, a bit about rigs. I think the American one's got the whole circuit in for an MFJ transceiver or something, if I remember rightly. So no shortage of information out there, but if you do get stuck, you know where to come and ask. And on that point, I'll hand it over to Nick and say, are there any questions?
Right, brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Steve. That was a very interesting talk through of QRP, and I'm sure people enjoyed that. So I'm going to open it up now to anyone who's got any questions that they want to put to Steve or comments to make. So I've got 3 screens to trail through here. Stick your hand up or unmute yourself and go in if you're bold enough. So who wants to go first? Yeah, David.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for the talk, very interesting. And I can see that QRP is a challenge. I've got a car that will do 5 miles an hour. I've also got the same car will do 70 miles an hour, but you don't travel at 5 miles an hour on the motorway.
The motorways I go on, you do.
You're on the M62 now, right? And the other comment I've got is one of the first slides you showed was 400 watts is S9 plus 20 dB ish. 750 milliwatts is S5 ish. I've just turned my radio on right now and I've got S9 of noise. So what's the point in putting out an S5 signal?
That's a very good point. But I did say, under the right conditions from the right location, you can do all sorts of things. But I do take your point. There's absolutely no benefit in being an S5 signal if you've got S9 noise. I suffer dreadfully from that here in the centre of the city. But with a bit of clever working, I've now got an antenna that's dropped the noise level considerably. I can actually hear things on 80 meters and 40 meters and make contacts with QRP. So where I thought all was lost, actually with a bit of ingenuity, you can do things. And coming back to your point about the car, again, another analogy that somebody said to me is, why would people go sailing when you can use a motorboat? And it's because it's fun and people enjoy doing it and it's a skill and all of that. And I think
absolutely, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that, and it's the same as an argument that I have with, or a discussion that I have with members of the Denbydale Club quite frequently, is that the valve radios and the old time gear and all that sort of stuff is fantastic and it's a niche thing, but you wouldn't drive a car that was 40 years old every day. You would drive them to rallies and on sunny Sundays, but you wouldn't do it every day.
And I say, amateur radio is a very diverse hobby, and there's room for everybody.
Best for us all, absolutely.
Yeah, and I wouldn't knock anybody for using high power because if that's if they enjoy doing it, great. And it's about enjoying radio.
I enjoy replacing my balance quite frequently.
I just happen to like doing it with low power.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Right, who's next? Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, good evening, Stephen. Thanks for the talk. Really, really interesting. I'm a keen worldwide flora fauna activator. I operate from the car with a TS480 running 75 watts. So that's no disadvantage. But the number of guys, particularly on the continent and particularly in Russia, go out into a forest in minus 40 degrees, running 5 watts and a little wire dipole, and they work the world. It's amazing what these guys achieve. They sat in the snow, they haven't got the comfort that I've got. And I take my hat off to them, fabulous operators. Lots of them CW, of course, but they really enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes back to the point David made. Location is everything. And I remember the first time I went to France, I took the radio. We had a place for the week in rural France. and I turned it on, and I thought it was broken. I was on 40 meters, and there was nothing coming out of the speaker. I checked the aerials, I checked this, and everything was fine. And it was only when a signal appeared out of zero noise that I realized it was because there was no city around it. There was no computers, there was no street lights and all of that. And the noise floor was just virtually zero. Some of the guys, we went to the Isle of Skye for a week playing radio, and that was the same. The noise just was non-existent, and what a difference that makes, you know. So yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there, Richard. Get yourself out into the countryside and away from the noise, and you'll work far more with less power.
Yeah, certainly. It certainly makes a big difference. Quite often, what I'll do, if I know I'm working somebody QRP, whether it be from home or out portable, I'll match their power. So I might be running 200 watts from home, and a guy comes on. I worked a guy the other day running 2 watts, and I drop my power down. I can only drop my 7700 down to 5, and it made hardly any difference to my signal. I was just as strong or just as weak.
Yeah.
So it just shows what can be achieved.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. David, G0FUW.
Yeah, thanks very much for the talk, Steve. It's brilliant. What you say about location, for about 2 years I lived 975 feet above sea level, and I ran an old FT290, it's back in 86, 87, something like that. And I used to work all over the north of England, and nobody believed that I was just running a Slim Jim until people said, "Oh, you ain't stopping me," and they were 40 and 50 miles away.
Yeah.
I mean, and if people don't think that height makes a difference on HF, it does. It's the law still happens. Every time you double your height, you double the you half the angle of takeoff.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
you actually get back more than you lose by being short of oxygen.
Definitely. No, I've operated up in the Lake District on the fells, and the difference between just being at the bottom of the fells where I lived and up on the top was incredible. But it just reminded me that I had a Slim Jim in my attic when I lived in Cumbria, and I used to work the Isle of Man repeater with an FT 290. But again, it was almost line of sight, so it didn't have a lot to contend with. So location is not just a weird telly program. It's
out of my back window, that location, which was the west side of Perth, I could see halfway to the horizon was Ferrybridge Power Station, which is something like 30 miles away. And there was loads of land beyond that. Everything was line of sight right to the coast belt. And just after I was divorced, I actually parked up about 25 feet higher, about 200 yards away. And I was just listening around 77, heard a repeater and missed the CW ident. So I called out, anybody listening can tell them what this repeater is. This is on 77s with 25 watts, I will admit it was quite a lot. Just ordinary FM on a thing on the car, and it was the Norfolk one.
Yeah.
I don't know how far away that was, but if anybody wants to know where that location is, there's a public place you can go that's only about 200 yards away, and it's slightly higher than my QTH used to be. And it's called Wolfstone Heights, if anybody knows it, up the top of Honley Moor for Denbydale members. Absolutely cracking location. 3 sides falls away.
Yeah.
And the other side, of course, goes up to the Pennines, but it's like through a valley, so it's not too bad to the west either.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much for an excellent talk, Steve.
You're welcome, David.
I'll just let it go around again. I'm going mute and
blind. Thank you, David. Right, anyone else got a question or point to put to Steve?
Yeah, I have, David.
Yes, go on. Fire away, Kevin.
Yeah, I just wonder I can't see my picture at the moment on the screen, but
I can see you holding up a oneer.
Yeah, and I've got what's there.
What, the actual one, or one that you've made yourself?
No, this is the actual one I got from George Dobbs. many, many years ago when he came to Denby Dale.
Ah.
I bet we're talking 30, 35 years.
I think the one was about 1985, was it? Something like that? Yeah,
I can't remember.
It was there. It's a while ago. It's a while ago. Oh, a nice archive bit of kit you've got there, Kevin.
Yeah, I've got all the instructions for it and everything by G30XX.
Yeah.
Sorry, GM30XX. And then there was all this paperwork as well that went with it.
Wow.
Which I made, and I just kept it in a drawer, and I just pulled it out this evening. That's the first time it's been out for many, many years.
Oh, you need to get it on the air. You've got to get it on the air. World QRP Day. Get it out
exactly. There. And just a matter of interest, by the way, HF, I use 5 watts. And on VHF and UHF, for all these contests that we've been doing, I just use 6 watts. And I seem to be getting very, very big scores compared to some of the others that got 4x4s up on 2 meters, you know. God knows why. Many thanks for the talk. It's been absolutely superb.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. Thank you.
Thanking you.
Okay, thank you, Kevin, for that bit of history there. Right, anyone else got a question or point to put to Steve? If I don't see you, just unmute yourself and fire away.
A comment to add to what Kevin said, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Gerald. Yeah,
just to follow on from that, it depends as well, of course, on what the propagation is, which you mentioned earlier on, Steve. And hopefully the propagation is improving at the moment. 10 meters, 6, 4's been wide open, and it's 10 meters. It was absolutely fantastic for me back in the 70s. I had a 10 watt FT7 mobile and got the 100 countries in a year. So it can be done on 10 watts sideband.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I remember, if I've still got it in one of these boxes behind me, a converted FMCB that I used to monitor and work in Scandinavia with just a bit of wire out the back was dead easy. And then one day it was a repeater came on, a bit like David was saying, and I gave it a call, and it was in New York, a 10 FM repeater that opened in New York. Absolutely crazy. So propagation is a big part of the jigsaw, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's converted FMCBs that came out, like the ICOM 1050 and the similar ones to that were very easy to convert.
Yeah.
It gave a great deal of fun with the little 4 watts.
Absolutely.
I got rid of the repeaters that you mentioned, but there's a Virgin Islands, I think there was one.
I never came across that one, but yeah, it was good fun, and hopefully it'll be returning soon.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you, Gerald. Right, anyone else got a question, point to make? Yeah, John, G4TKO.
Yeah, I've been running Whisper for the last, I don't know, a year or so, and the last few days on 40 meters with QRP, at the moment with QRP Labs CW transceiver, and get VK7 regularly about 5 o'clock in the morning. Can't believe it. The reports aren't fantastic, but nevertheless, and the antenna is a bit of end-fed wire. It's unbelievable. And I must confess, or make a comment about Hans, I can't believe that a guy like him can provide so much support for the gear he produces for so little money. It's unbelievable. Yeah,
no, he's a good guy, and I know that little QCX has done him very well. I don't know if I'm telling tales out of school, but he sold the transceivers for Yota at cost price, and we had 90. I think we had 100 kits off him, and he just gave them us at cost price. He wouldn't take anything over above that. So you know that. It was a good development opportunity for him, I have to say, because I say he went on to sell 10,000, not at cost price, so he's done all right out of it.
Well,
as you say, really helpful guy.
I mean, even at what they cost, $45, it's for nothing.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do. But he's got a very good business model in that the way he sources his components, and and all of that. And but no, he's great, and as you say, really helpful, friendly guy. It's really good.
I don't think he goes to sleep at night.
Oh no, I can confirm that, because when he was developing the thing, I'd get a phone call or a Skype with him, and he'd say, "I was up all night last night trying to figure out how I could fix this, and I developed this." And while I was at it, I thought, could I incorporate that as well? So and we went from what was a very basic thing to something that was pretty complex, you know. So it's,
I mean, if you think about it, all the test gears built in that for 45 or whatever it is.
yeah.
I mean, you've got a DVM, you've got a frequency counter, you've got a signal generator. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I've built 2 of them now, and I can't wait for the multi-mode one.
Yeah, it's a cracking bit of kit, it really is.
And I'm getting on a bit, so the components are a little bit small, Gerald.
Okay, thank you, John. David, G6VMI, I think you had a question.
Hi, not really just a question, just a comment. Just to say, this is the chair of the Coulsdon Transmitter Society, based down in South London. Just to say to you, Nick, thanks so much for advertising the Zoom. I found it eventually on the Facebook pages, and I passed it around the club, and I see there's a couple of other of my club members on site as well. And we're starting to do it ourselves. We're a little bit slow, but we are a small club, about 18 odd members. So we're actually doing committee meetings by Zoom, and we're starting to do meetings by Zoom. Just to say thank you very much for getting this all facilitated.
No problem. I have to say to you, David, we've had great fun, I think, in the club, attracting speakers that we would never have got to Denby Dale. Steve included. Steve wouldn't travel up from his neck of the woods to come to Denby Dale on a Wednesday night to speak to the club. And it's kind of just opened up the club locally to speakers. I mean, we've got Bob Heil coming up shortly, speaking at the club. You know, it's inconceivable that we would have got Bob Heil to come and talk in the Pie Hall in Denby Dale. And we've had members that have been able to come along to our meetings that sometimes have struggled physically to come along to our meetings, even if they wanted to do so. So, you know, I think we've increased the accessibility of the club. One of the things, David, if you're looking at it in Coulsdon, that we've been talking about in Denby Dale, is when we have that wonderful moment when we're able to have physical meetings together. We want to run physical and online together at the same time, so that you can make a choice. You can come to the club online and participate with those sitting in the room, or you can come into the meeting, and that obviously would apply to speakers as well. So we can continue to invite speakers from across the world, as we have done at our club meetings. So I think there's definitely a future here for that kind of what I would call a mixed mode form of meeting, to mix our radio metaphors up there. So thanks, David.
Funny enough, you're saying that, I was actually thinking about that today myself, as we're in the process of upgrading to a club-based professional version. So we can do exactly the same thing as you're doing. So we have the meeting, the camera in the meeting. Anybody else who can't get there can see what's going on. What I've done also is I've had a look on the website and seen all the other meetings you're going to do. If that's okay with you, I'd like to pass it around to our local areas. Bob Heil was actually going to do one at our local sister club in Sutton and Sheen, but had to cancel at the last moment. So if that's okay with you, just give us a thumbs up.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
No problem, David. Okay, someone had their hand up. Oh, Tristan. I'll just unmute you. There we go. You need to unmute yourself, Tristan.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right.
Very good evening to you, Steve, and everybody else. It's a pleasure to be part of the this meeting on Zoom tonight. I thank you for your talk on QRP, as I used to be a member because I'm only limited to, you know, as a QRP operator, but I just like to thank you for your wonderful talk on the QRP and what's available for people like myself who are QRP operators. And I just like to thank you for your presentation to us here this evening, and also because it's having a Zoom and having the Zoom application and being able to hold these meetings is very much appreciated. So thank you very much, Steve.
No, you're very welcome, Tristan. If get yourself rejoined with the club and you'll be able to participate in our virtual convention in September, which is on the 5th and 6th of September, just in case anybody's interested.
I'm not involved with any club at the moment because I'll just say to you briefly, I wasn't made I was made unwelcomed member, so I don't participate in any clubs anymore, and I've made a lot of friends on here. And you know, if I know I don't live near the Denbydale club, but I wouldn't ask for a better club, and the people that are around me this evening who allow me to join in, and I very much appreciate your time and effort as the Denby club as well. So thank you very much, Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Tristan. That's very kind of you, and we've enjoyed having you and all the other visitors to our club meeting. So very nice to get your thanks there, Tristan.
Thank you.
Right. Anyone else got a question or contribution they'd like to make? I'm trying to look around the room. Right, if there's someone I haven't got a video camera on, so I can't see you waving at me, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, comment there, please.
Yeah, go on, fire away.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for a most splendid talk. Very well put together. One problem I've found, thought that was me. Seemed to have got a picture of Kevin.
Just keep going, John.
Are you on my back?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's very nice making simple stuff at home, but one of the main difficulties has always been something that you can tune in without neurosurgeons' fingers. And I think this is where an awful lot of simple designs just fall over. If you're expert, know what you're doing, fine, but offer them for a beginner, no way, because he'll, I can't work this, and throw it away.
I
it's a significant problem that I think people lose sight of. The usability of things. Yeah, and I hate to say that the Sudden, for example, lovely simple receiver, but as presented, not terribly usable. And it's very difficult to do the mechanics of something like that. Perhaps with the digital VFOs and things, we're getting something much easier to use, but it's getting a long way away from simplicity.
Well, you say that, but Pete Giuliano's thing is basically it's a Sudden circuitry, but the DDS add-on, you've got your Arduino Nano, which is like a big IC, if you like. You've got your DDS chip, which is like another IC. A board to join them together, and jobs are good. And one of the things which I'm trying to sort of work towards is produce an article for beginners to build their first QRP radio. Don Field from PW has agreed to run it if I can produce it, and I'm getting there. In fact, there's a PCB sitting here on the bench for the next bit of the jigsaw. But it won't be like a Sprat article that just gives you the basic circuit and get on with it. It'll be a blow-by-blow, do this, test this, and take you through the process. So picking up on that exact point, John, is that not everybody knows what to do because we've all had to learn. And it's because of some of George Dobbs's articles that I started tinkering and got confidence that actually you can do this stuff. And some of the stuff we've got access to now makes life a lot easier. So yeah, I hear what you say. We are trying to make it easier for people to get into, and that's one of the reasons I run buildathons and things, so that people can come along and we can help them and show them how it's not that difficult. If you know once you've got those basic skills, it's amazing what you can achieve. So I don't dismiss what you say. I appreciate it's difficult if you don't know where to start. we're trying to address that.
Yeah, yes, I quite agree. And that would be very welcome to see that. I mean, I started an awful long time ago, not a new call sign, and I started when I was about 10, 11, making a crystal set. Then a one-valve radio out of PW, I think, which I could just about get the home service on, with the double triode in it and a live chassis, and I'm still here. And no doubt the health and safety pixies will throw up their hands in horror, but
yeah,
you know, it's a long development process, building better receivers to get Voice of America better.
Yeah.
That takes me back, I'm afraid, but there we are. Good luck is all I can say, and thank you very much for a most interesting talk.
Oh,
I can't work QRP here. They can't hear me on 100 watts. So I got no chance. But the idea is great.
Cool.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Right. Anyone else for a question or contribution?
Yeah. Can I just ask you? You mentioned the GQRP convention. Can you give us any insider information on what's going to be happening?
Oh, insider information. I'm going to check if anybody's listening. Well, basically, the 5th and 6th of September were going to be the Telford QRP convention / Hamfest. Once we realised that wasn't going to happen, we thought, well, what can we do to fill that void? So we're still out in consultation mode to find out, A, whether people want to do it. I think from what we've seen so far, there probably is more than enough to make it viable. The broad idea is on the Saturday, the 5th, there's going to be a virtual build-a-thon. I've no idea how that's going to work or what we're going to do, but we'll try it. There may be some other sort of sideshow talks where people can do show and tell. This is what I built, this is how I did it, that sort of thing. And then on the Sunday, there'll be a series of sort of keynote speakers, shall we say. I've had confirmation. There's a guy going to be talking from Canada about the, get it right, the terminated tilted folded dipole. John did an article on that and it went down very well in Sprat, so he's agreed to do an expansion of that as a talk. And Callum, I forget his second name now, the DX Commander, he's agreed to come and talk about antennas and QRP and so on. So we've got a number of things that have lined up already, but because it's still in the process of development, that's roughly what we're thinking about. So you know as much as I do now, Ian.
Sounds good. I look forward to coming to join you. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation.
Yeah, and I can probably add to it as well. Steve doesn't know some of this yet, but from the survey we've been running to judge the interest that I've been helping Steve and the fellow club officers do, we've now got 27 people that want to help in organising it. We've got 54 people who have offered to do presentations. Some of them are going to be, if they do it, you know, fairly big ones, some little things. So there's a great opportunity. I mean, one of the things that Steve suggested, which I think is a good idea, a bit like earlier on this evening with Kevin flashing his wanna, is to get some people, I think they need to think about it in advance, but to do a show and tell on some of their QRP kits that they've built and some of their radios that they use, and maybe even show them in operation as well. That will be interesting to people thinking about these things. I mean, Steve did a great run through of QRP kits. There's a number of other people around. There's a guy in Spain, EA3GCY. Anyone thinking of building a kit? I've built a few of his kits. They're really excellent and very good value that work extremely well. And going back to the point that was made a bit earlier about some things you struggle to get them working. It depends very much, particularly for beginners with kits, doesn't it, Steve, on how good the information is that goes along with it. And if people are really good at it and they write it really well and very clearly, then it gets built first time and works first time, really. But some of the stuff that's around, is better than Spratt's in terms of a circuit diagram and a few components on a little bit that you're struggling to read the handwritten whatever it was. But some of the kits aren't much better than that, and I think we've all struggled over the years sometimes with some of them. But there is some great stuff around, and you can get on the air for very, very. I mean, that, you know, I'm just going to put on the table the first time I worked Australia on 1 watt with a small 3 transistor transmitter I built. I was more excited about anything I'd ever done in amateur radio before, with a piece of wire in the back garden. You know, I just couldn't believe it. And all my family have got fed up me going on about, do you know, the power of that was less than, you know, a torch bulb, less than the power in that torch bulb. And I spoke to some in Australia with that over a radio wave. I mean, it's really sensational, isn't it, Steve? I mean, once
absolutely
it gets you, it's sensational.
It is amazing, and sometimes you don't believe it's happening. And the one I always quote, I was operating on 6 meters, and I had a wire loop out in a field, and I'd been working Croatia, Italy, whatever. It was all 59006, rattling away. And then this next guy came back and he said, "Well, I can just about get you. You're about 5 and 3." And I thought, "Wow, what's going on here? Everything's been fine. You know, why have I suddenly dropped in signal?" And I looked round, and the antenna was lying flat on the floor, and I was still working this guy in Croatia with I think it was 3 watts or 4 watts on 6 meters, and you think, wow, that's just unbelievable that those radio waves can propagate that far with everything against them. You know. I remember asking George once about short antennas, and I said, somebody's told me that, you know, I'm tying one arm behind my back. And he said, well, the fact you're using QRP and the short antenna, you're operating with both hands tied behind your back, but you're still doing it. So crack on. You know? So it's that thing about you do what you can, and if it's good fun, keep doing it. And if it stops being fun, stop it. That's always been my philosophy.
Okay, Kevin again, go on.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Steve, I just wondered, I noticed that CM House, they're still producing kits. I built many of their kits in the past, and the one that the main one that I built was the 20 meter. I built a 20 meter transmitter receiver. Sorry, it wasn't. It was an 80 meter transmitter receiver. And it worked absolutely superb. Very, very pleased with it. But I hadn't realised they were still going on QRP products. Go ahead.
No, unfortunately, they don't operate anymore. The only place you'll get CM House gear is through what's his name, down on Alderney in the Channel Isles, who bought the company when House packed up. And he's still got a few bits and pieces, but all the documentation for CM House kits are available to QRP club members, by the way. That's another club benefit that you get. So if you need any documentation for CM House kits and you're a QRP club member, you can get those through our membership.
Oh, that's super. Yeah.
But yeah, sadly,
Thank you very much.
The kits aren't available for general sort of production these days. But I agree that they were very good kits. They certainly were.
They were. Well, I built the whole lot. I built the transmitter receiver with all the good bits in it. I also built the ATU. A little 30-watt ATU was, in fact, I've still got it and I still use it. Absolutely superb piece of kit.
Yeah, the people you want are Chris, TUX.
That's it. Well done, Tex.
Kits.
Right. Thank you very much, Steve.
And
Thank
Kevin, you. if you are after documentation, I keep the documentation on behalf of the G QRP club. So you can get documentation from me, G1TEX.
Thanks very much for that. It's not necessarily the documentation. I was thinking about going to buy some more kits again, but.
Well, I've actually had several people recently who've picked up kits at car boot sales and on eBay. So they are still available, but no longer new.
That's a shame that. They were very good. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, thanks very much for that.
Okay, back to you,
Yeah.
Nick.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, me too, Tex. I've got a load of house bits I built over the years that still work, beautifully made.
Nick, can I come on that one, please?
Yeah, go on, Gerald.
Yeah, just a quick one. I've got quite a few other kits that I still haven't built up, Kevin. If you want, you can have them. And there's the box there, I think, for one of them.
Ooh.
But so if you do need anything like that, I've got one or two that you might find useful. Over to you, Nick.
You're going to be saying they're too technical for you, Gerald?
No, I've got lots more I'm still working on at the moment.
Okay, I'll let you off.
Okay. Nick?
Yes, go on, who was that? Someone else wants to come in before we wrap it up for the evening? Everyone's gone quiet. If we've come to its conclusion, I'd like to just thank Steve for his contribution tonight. I think lots of stuff in there and very interesting, and a great flavour of hopefully what will be a good online convention that we can Denby Dale can help Steve and the GQRP club put on. And if any of the Denby Dale club members want to help me, you're more than welcome to dive in. Just doing the analysis, we've been running.
Oh dear.
Oh no.
Oh dear.
That was something new. That's not happened before.
He's gone. When you get to the free text, stuff, there's an awful lot of ideas that people have chucked in, and it's going to take a little bit of analysis to work our way through what it is that people want. Steve, you've got lots of ideas for the build-a-thon as well.
Good,
which is good. Steve, do you want to say a few words in closing, and then I'll just hand over to Gerald to do his customary bit on behalf of the club?
Okay, well, I think we've had a good discussion there, and a lot of the sort of key points were reiterated, and I'd just like to thank everybody for turning up. It's nice when you do a talk like this that you're not talking to an empty room, even though I am talking to an empty room. I'm not. So thank you, Nick, for inviting me to do this, and thanks for everybody for turning up. And as I say, if you haven't tried QRP before, give it a go on World QRP Day, or join in the PWQRP contest and see how you get on.
Well done, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Yeah,
and I
thank
think
you.
People are showing their appreciation, as you can see on the little hands around
George, I think George would have been very pleased.
Yes.
Good.
Gerald, do you want to just conclude for us?
Yeah, fine, Nick. Thank you for handling all the meeting, and thank you, Steve, for coming talking to us tonight. It's been really interesting. And as Kevin already said, it was quite a while since Reverend George Dobbs came. We had to actually, then we couldn't have it in our normal meeting room. We had to have it in Shelley Cricket Field, just on the road here, in a little cricket club hut, because the normal venue wasn't available. So you've come to us when the normal room isn't available. As well. We really appreciate you coming or doing it on this method. And yeah, it's been really interesting. It's enlivened me interest in sort of perhaps digging out my 817 again, which is just in the cupboard at the side here. Thank you very much indeed, and telling us about this new convention that we're coming up in September as well. And everyone else has already shown their appreciation, but there is the reaction button down at the bottom. So if you want to show your clapping, you're welcome to do that, guys. And to everyone who's a guest for us as well, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Okay, over to you again, Nick.
Okay, thank you, Gerald. Okay, I'm going to